Let's be honest here, jungling can be one of the most confusing roles in all of League, as you're just constantly being forced to make a ton of decisions all across the map, which is especially difficult considering how ridiculously random solo queue typically is gonna be. And that's where a huge frustration for a ton of players can really come from. Your choices, they won't always have a consistent outcome. For example, in a lane like top, if you build a slow push, the same thing is usually gonna always happen. You can base, you can roam, you can dive. The outcome is usually going to be the same. On the other hand, jungle decisions are so incredibly reliant on how your random teammates play that your choices, they won't always lead to the same result. And sometimes your team playing poorly just makes your good decisions look bad, while on the other hand, when your team plays well, it might actually hide your mistakes without you even being aware that you played poorly. This is a huge issue, and it's why results-oriented junglers, they really don't ever improve at League. And that's why in this guide, we're going to test you. That's right, I said test you on whether you know what good jungling looks like. We're going to be showing you some games with a wide variety of elos, and it's going to be on you. That's right, I said you, to figure out whether the player we're reviewing is playing good or is playing bad. We're going to show you everything that happens with all the relevant info, letting you test yourself to see if you got what it takes to climb. Now, as you watch, make sure to pay close attention to everything. I'm talking about mechanics, talking about pathing, awareness, everything in between, and let's see if you're actually a good or a bad jungler. So let's jump right into our very first example, and here we have an Amumu versus a Kayn. The game is 7 minutes in as Amumu did his topside camps and immediately started his red buff right as it respawned. Afterwards, he looks to go to the river when he sees Set randomly fighting Fiora. He turns around, cues to the wave, but thinks the kill angle isn't really quite there, and he backs off. Now, as this happens, there's a random fight at the bot side river where Amumu spots the enemy Kayn. This gives Amumu the confidence to take the spawning grubs. While doing so, the blue team did end up winning the fight in the river, and we can see Kayn go into Amumu's jungle. Amumu crosses mid, goes to his wolves, and hits level 7 off of him. Then he notices his bot lane building a sizable slow push. They're also Draven and Rel, which is an extremely aggressive duo. So, Amumu goes to back him up, he clears the pink in the tri-brush that spots him, and then he looks to dive. This turns into a pretty messy fight, and there's some crazy plays all around here, and Amumu ends up greeting for the wave, and the dive ends up being a 3 for 3. So based on everything that you just saw and we went through, what do you think of this Amumu here? Is he a good or is he a bad jungler? If you didn't get bad vibes from this Amumu, then you really need to listen up here, as this is a platinum elo player who desperately needs some jungling coaching. So let's start all the way back here during the top gank. Set used both his E and W during the trade with Fiora. Amumu was literally standing right next to him with his ult up. We see this all the time from low elo junglers. Players are often really going to be afraid of wasting big cooldowns if a play isn't guaranteed, but Amumu should have just pressed R here. Worst case, Set flashes away with a sliver of HP left and has to base. Best case, it's an easy kill, giving his Fiora a huge commanding lead. Now, if that somehow wasn't the biggest tell that Amumu was bad though, that comes now. Remember during Grubs, Amumu saw Kayn's team win the fight and Kayn go into his bot side jungle. He should assume every camp here was taken. After Grubs, Amumu should counter invade. Amumu's wolves being up was extremely lucky, and he shouldn't have gotten level 7 here. And then during the dive, there was a subtle but crucial mistake there as well. You should have noticed how Amumu was hitting the ward while Draven and Rel's wave was crashing. Low elo junglers do tend to care way too much about vision. If Amumu's goal is to dive, then why does he care if they have vision of him in the tri-brush? It's completely irrelevant because he's gonna dive anyway. In fact, notice Twisted Fate and Kayn's positions at this very moment. One is stuck under tower and the other is in base. If Amumu hadn't wasted so much time here, the play would have been made a whole lot faster, potentially letting them secure the kills before those two even reacted. Now, at the very least, Kayn definitely wouldn't have been here in time to counter. Lastly, this proxy death does look a little bit sus. But this is definitely more of a silly mistake, and we're picking at things here rather than a huge one like the ones that we discussed so far. Trust me, even challenger junglers die stupid deaths like this one from time to time, and that is a little bit of a foreshadowing for later in this guide, so listen up. Now, if you are serious about improving and not looking like the Amumu from that game there, then you need to check out our crushing the early game course over its skill cap. Then we're going to teach you how to avoid all of these mistakes and much, much more, which are costing players like that Amumu their early games. But that's not all. We have the most comprehensive jungling courses on the whole internet, not just covering the early game, but everything before and everything after, to make sure you always know what you're doing at every single step of the game. Our courses are so good at getting you the LP you want that we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee while actively using our service. If you don't improve while you're using skill cap, you're going to get your money back, and it's as easy as that. That's how confident that we are in our jungling courses. So if you really want to step up your jungling, then use the discount link below to sign up. Okay, let's move on from that Amumu to our next example, featuring an early aggression matchup between Rexai and Echo. Now we're going to be following Rexai during her initial clear as she does Raptors, Krugs, and then Red to hit level 3. Now after doing so, she notices that the enemy Smolder is playing way too aggressively in mid lane, so a transition gank is definitely going to be in order here. Rexai comes in from behind, gets a huge burst of damage, forcing Smolder to flash, and now he's also going to have to base and TP back. Now after the gank, Rexai goes behind the Dragon Pit wall, hits the Scryer's Bloom, and gets some amazing intel here. Because Krugs are already down, it's safe to assume that Echo started bot side and is on his way to top. Rexai then notices that the enemy bot lane duo is playing fairly aggressively to trade, and with the confidence that she won't be counter-ganked by Echo, Rexai heads down there, flanks him, and scores an easy kill. Rexai ain't done yet though. She notices Smolder is back in mid and already at half HP. Now meanwhile, Akali has both summoners still up, Ignite being one of them. Rexai also still has Flash after both of those previous ganks, so she passed from bottom straight to mid. She eased to cut off Smolder's escape, and there's a counter gank waiting, leading to Rexai and Akali's deaths. Not great, but what do you think about this? Was Rexai playing well here and just got a bit unlucky there at the end, or was she a bad jungler to begin with? Now, some of her mistakes were a little bit subtle, but this Rexai definitely had a bad early game. Now, this is also a Masters Elo game here, and it really goes to show how some of the basic concepts escape even the top percentile of players. So let's start with her initial route, which should have already left you a little bit suspicious of Rexai. To be clear, Raptor's start is a much more popular opening route these days because junglers like starting without a leash. We won't see the consequences of this quite yet, but do remember that Raptors, Krugs, Red in that order is a greedier opening route compared to Red, Krugs, Raptors. Typically, starting Raptors and Krugs is really good for power farmers who want to get a faster Raptors respawn timer. However, this requires you to be ready to take the respawning Raptors as they spawn. Keep that in mind as we continue. The mid lane transition gank was definitely good from Rexai. There's nothing really bad there. That being said though, what comes next is definitely a mistake with a misleading result. Rexai goes from full vision in mid to the river and even hits the Scryer's Bloom in the jungle. Remember that this gives vision of you to the enemy team. The bot lane duo had so much information and time to react to Rexai coming their way, and not only that, but they also had all their summoners up. Now, if this was an ADC or a support guide, trust us, we'd be flaming these two absolutely non-stop. But their terrible awareness still does not make Rexai's gank any much the better. As a jungler, you cannot go for low percentage ganks when your opponents have perfect information of your pathing. This gank should never have worked, and it's especially bad because Rexai is already bad in her clear. Thankfully, there is justice in the world, and the mid lane play punishes Rexai for her criminal pathing straight to jail. Guys, look at the time for when Rexai is coming into flank. It's 3 minutes and 40 seconds. This is a timer that you all know about, and we have said 1,000 times. Every jungler in the current meta can easily full clear by 3:30 and take the Scuttle Crab as it spawns. Akali was so low, and Rexai was still level 3 and missing some HP as well. And if you recall, Rexai even knew Echo's pathing from the Scryer Bloom she just used. This gank alone should have told you everything you need to know about Rexai. This was definitely bad jungling and leaves a lot to be desired out of a higher elo player. And a final note here, this is why Raptors start, if you're looking to gank this often, is so bad. If you do Raptors start, they're going to respawn in around 4 minutes. Even if Rexai didn't die mid, she would be level 3 to Echo's 4, so she can't contest her own Raptor respawn. Echo would be in perfect position to take the respawning Raptors and then Krugs, while Rexai would be forced to just go finish her blue side jungle. Even with the kill she got in bot lane, she'd fall extremely far behind. So with all that said, keep pathing in mind as we move on to review our next example of a Nocturn versus Fiddlesticks. At the start of the game, everyone is AFK, meaning Nocturn really doesn't have any info to work with here. So what he does is a standard full clear. Red, Krugs, Raptors, Wolves, Gromp, and Blue. As he transitions to Scuttle, we'll just let you know we haven't seen Fiddlesticks on the map yet here. So after doing Scuttle, Nocturn decides to cross through mid to the other one to see if it's potentially up and to gather some information along the way. As he gets into the river though, Nocturn spots the Scuttle has very recently been taken. We also see that his bot lane has already taken a massive beating. With these two bits of information here, Nocturn decides to path through the fallen Scuttle's vision, alerting everyone on the map of where he is. This is what he sees as he decides to commit to the gank. So he rushes down and hopes for an engage from his Tahm Kench. Now unfortunately the gank ends up being kind of sloppy. In fact, it was so overforced by Nocturn and his team that the enemy duo ends up being baited into fighting back, and Victor eventually goes down for getting greedy. Now that was obviously a little bit of a weird sequence, but what do you guys think? Was this a good or was it a bad start to the game? Now here's a hint. Think about the current time in the game here. This was a platinum elo game, and as a result, there were a lot of questionable decisions here. But we're actually going to say that this was kind of a good start to the game by Nocturn. And here's why. The initial clear is mostly fine. The only thing to remember is that Nocturn started on red. After taking the first Scuttle, there wasn't really anything to do on the map. So Nocturn checking the bot side Scuttle is more than fair here. The bot gank is where things get a little bit weird though. First things first, so like we mentioned earlier, you really don't want to overthink being on vision. If we go back to this moment that we saw earlier, it's fair to say that the enemy Caitlyn and Victor are extremely overextended, and Tahm Kench is in range to engage with his W. The only reason you might not go for this gank is because Fiddle is very likely in the area somewhere, as he just took the Scuttle Crab. But Nocturn is full HP and has W and his spell shield, which hard counters Fiddle. Getting countered really isn't all that threatening. The only reason this gank was extremely sloppy is because Tahm Kench did, well, that. He just decided to walk backwards while Nocturn was coming in, and, well, that was just obviously awful, as he's now barely out of his own W's engage range. And that's the reason everything was just so sloppy in the first place. Like we mentioned at the start of this guide, jungling is annoying because of silly reasons like that. Your teammates' weird plays, they can sometimes make your good decisions look way worse than they actually are. But we still haven't covered why this was a good gank in the first place. Ganking bot lane was actually a good idea right now, specifically because of the game timer. Remember, your second round of camps usually start respawning at around 4 minutes and 20 seconds into the game. As a jungler, you always want to be efficient with your camp clearing while also finding windows of opportunity to pressure the map in between farming. Right now, Nocturn had a small window to make a play. So even though Kench missed his W, remember that his Krugs, they aren't even up yet, meaning that Nocturn has free time to help out a losing lane and not lose much power for it in the process. That's the beauty of Nocturn's decision here. Solo queue, well, it's stupid and it's random, but by ganking bot lane and playing around where his camps were about to respawn, he can just go right back to farming immediately. He full clears yet again and gets a great base timer. Nocturn comes back onto the map with a good power spike, steals the Scuttle, and hits level 6. This lets him make an extremely aggressive play, getting his team a huge lead off of it. That sequence is precisely why every good jungler advocates being efficient in their clears and their ganks. In solo queue, the pure randomness of fights is really going to drive you crazy. But if you're always farming well and you're balancing ganks with your respawning camps, then you're going to be just like this Nocturn here. Farmed, strong, ready to win any of those random fights that come your way. All right, moving on to our fourth and final example. It's a little bit tricky here, and we doubt most of you are going to be able to see everything that happens in this. So we're going to give you a hint right out the gate here. This matchup is a Volibar versus a Pantheon jungle, and pay very, very close attention to Volibar's movement as you watch what happens here. The game begins with a ward on the enemy Rapt from Azir, and Rise also placed one on Volibear's Raptors as well. So we know Pantheon is either starting red or at his blue. Volibear does Raptors, red, Krugs for his opening path. After Krugs, he notices how aggressively Rise is playing in mid. Despite crossing through a warded area, Volibear decides to transition gank towards his bottom side. Rise somehow didn't see it coming and loses his flash for free. From there, Volibear is looking to go to his blue side, but changes his mind as we haven't seen Pantheon yet, and the Raptors are still up. Knowing the red is likely still up, Volibear rushes to it and places a ward. Now he loops back out and sees Pantheon kind of low finishing the Raptors. He steals the big one with Smite and gets another free flash. Vola doesn't overchase, instead he goes back into the jungle and looks to cheese the Pantheon by hiding in the Raptor brush. This turns out to be a huge mistake here. Pantheon and Rise ward him out, chain their CC, and punish Volibear's greed. What do you think here? Was that good jungling that happened to go wrong, or just another coin flip jungler like we've seen so much in this video already? So this was a pretty tricky one, and I'm glad we included it here. Don't feel bad if you didn't get it, as that was a challenger game, and a professional jungler was playing Volibar, which we wouldn't blame you for doubting at first. To understand why that was good jungling though, we're really going to analyze that entire sequence from the enemy's perspective so you can appreciate what really happened here. First, let's start with the initial clear. Volibar knew he was spotted on Raptors as he saw the ward when it was placed, meaning Ryze has perfect information on Volibar's route. He saw him go from Raptors all the way to red. What's important to understand though is that challengers are used to working with incomplete information. They're used to it. In fact, this isn't even hard to do in the early game. Volibar is obviously going to clear his 3 topside camps, then either gank top through Tribrush or path through this little bit of fog of war to his bot side jungle. Ryze is playing super aggressively, precisely because there is no way he gets ganked. But Volibar caught something Ryze messed up on, and if you don't know this trick yet, listen up. You can check exactly how much of an enemy ward is spotting by normal casting your own ward and hovering it over the marked ward location. This is especially useful because Raptor wards, they're so common these days, and players place them in all sorts of different spots. By using this trick, you can accurately know whether you can avoid vision, and Volibar exploited Ryze's slightly bad ward placement. Volibar knew Ryze felt safe due to that ward, and that's exactly why that gank looked so easy to pull off. But Volibar's vision mind games, they really didn't end there. Notice how after that gank, Volibar is clearly walking to his blue side jungle. We already know this is not the case, but his movement was very convincing here, especially because transition ganks are so incredibly common. He didn't invade until after he'd fed that Ryze misinformation. This is why Pantheon felt relatively safe as he did Raptors. He assumed Volibar was unlikely here, so he wasn't that afraid being low on health. And that's precisely why he was so caught off guard as Volibar surprises him from the brush. So now we get to this pivotal moment, which requires you to remember that this is a challenger game. Everyone is playing better than your average teammates here. Notice how after Volibar gets Pantheon's flash, he does a similar misinformation move here, pretending he's looping behind the red buff wall to invade. This was a brilliant fake, textbook, because what Volibar did here is pretty dang odd. The Raptors are already down, so it doesn't make sense to go into the Raptor brush. But Volibar knows that from where he was standing and where Pantheon is standing, that he'd get to the brush first, letting it potentially catch Pantheon off guard. I mean, heck, you can even see the blue side pings going off in the jungle. They all think he is currently around red buff. It just so happens that Pantheon randomly warded the Raptor brush, and Ryze fully committed to helping him with the invade, which Volibar clearly didn't expect. So he absolutely just went down looking a bit silly in the process. Obviously, that was a mistake, and maybe a little bit too aggressive by Volibar at the end. But like we said, that's what makes jungling such a weird bag, man. That play could have very easily gone well if the blue team played it just a little bit differently. It's just that things kind of go wrong sometimes. The outcome should really never affect how you feel about your decisions here. Volibar was clearly reading the map and manipulating his opponents perfectly right up until the very end, which is what actually matters when deciding whether your play was good or it was bad. And remember guys, if you want to improve fast with the best jungling course on the whole dang internet, then sign up with the discount link below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you at the next one.